Rookie tournaments happening all weekend around the NHL, including the debut of Macklin Celebrini. We've got that, plus the latest on the Blackhawks' top prospects and a Leafs team that is hoping to get a little bit younger, but do they have the players in place? We've got all that and more on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Gil Martin here, and welcome everybody to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you get new episodes as soon as they drop. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show the host of Locked On Sharks, JD Young. And JD, rookie tournaments underway this past weekend, and the Sharks right in the middle of it. Do the Sharks have more top prospects in these tournaments than anybody else out there?
It feels like it. On Friday's game, the Sharks rolled out 5 first-round picks in Will Smith. Macklin Celebrini was the first overall pick in this past draft. Sam Dickinson, Quentin Musty, and Philip Beested. And that does even include William Macklin, who's kind of graduated beyond the prospect. You have Shakir Mukhamadullin, who's dealing with some soreness, so wasn't played, and Yaroslav Askarov, who they acquired from the Preds. So the Sharks, they're swimming in top-end prospect talent right now, and it feels great, Gil. I highly recommend it.
Well, I know, Friday you had a 3-2 win over the Utah Hockey Club. Talk to me about some of these prospects. How did Celebrini and Smith and company all look out there?
Macklin Celebrini, we'll start there, of course, being the number 1 overall pick, 18-year-old kid who's going to be making his NHL debut this season. You can just see those special, kind of what makes him a special player. He's good at everything, right? Shooting, skating, passing, whatever. But the thing, every time I watch him, whether it's back in his time with Boston University and, the limited times you gotten to see him playing in Teal, is his ability to kind of know when to control and manipulate space, right? When to draw players towards him, that way opening up space for his line mates, and still being able to kind of pass the puck with 2 guys around him. His ability to kind of remain calm under pressure in those moments, but that ability to know when, okay, I got to kick it up a gear, got to kick it down a gear, try to manipulate time and space, knowing where everyone is on the ice. And again, right, we don't want to get over, you don't want to overdo it with a rookie tournament. But at the same time, he's just doing stuff that other guys out there aren't doing. And those are relatable skills when it comes to the NHL, is your ability to kind of play with pace, your ability to manipulate space. Celebrini looks as advertised. And he was playing with Kasper Holton, who was a 2nd-round pick in last year's draft, played with London, and got some time. Also, we saw him playing with Will Smith when at the end of a period. But you see with Celebrini just how special and how he's going to be that kind of foundational piece for the Sharks as they try to turn this thing around. And he's going to have his up and downs this season, but you couldn't be more walk away just without being impressed with what he was doing. And then Will Smith, who the Sharks drafted 4th overall in the 2023 draft, you could see he's really worked to try to put some muscle on, being, 6 foot, 190 pounds, kind of in that range right now. His ability, I think, to control the puck and then also work off of his other teammates is, I think, what really impressed me the most. He was playing with Quentin Musty, who was also a 1st-round pick in that draft. And those two have already showed a lot of chemistry, going even back to last year's kind of rookie tournament as well. So for Sharks fans, though, you have to be just super excited about not only this season, but seasons, kind of what this team is going to be over the next couple of years, as these two guys are set to be kind of your pillars in your next core.
Where do you think they're going to fit in once the season starts in this lineup? And will they be line mates at any point, do you think?
I don't think Ryan Morassutti is going to put them together right away, right? There's already so many young players on this team. You have William Macklin, who's played a full season. You have Fabian Zetterlund, who's kind of had his breakout season last year. I assume they're going to try to keep these guys with veterans, right? They went out of their way this offseason to get guys like Tyler Toffoli, who's a walking 25 to 30 goal scorer every season. Alex Wenberg, who I think is going to be kind of Logan Couture insurance in case Couture just never can get back. But I don't see those guys kind of playing together right away. I'm sure they'll play on the power play because the Sharks will want to try to just get good players on the power play. But I don't see them kind of playing together. And the way I kind of picture it, I assume Mikael Granlund, who was the Sharks' leading scorer last year, is probably going to be the 1C to start the season, with Celebrini as the 2C, and then Will Smith will probably start on the wing. But as the season goes on, don't be surprised when, by Christmas time, Macklin Celebrini's kind of taking that 1C position. And then Will Smith, as as guys kind of get traded and, as he continues his development, probably maybe starts the season at wing and maybe slides to center at some point. So, but yeah, I think for the Sharks, they've done a much better job of kind of protecting their assets by putting more veteran players in the lineup. And, you expect William Eklund to kind of have his breakout season this year after kind of an up and down rookie season. And you could really see like where this team is going to be built, and it's going to be built down the middle and in its forward group.
Any other players stand out this weekend so far?
Yeah, I think the 2023 fourth round pick defenseman Luca Cagnoni. So 5'9", one of our short kings here. He had an outstanding season in the WHL, becoming the first defenseman to score 90 points in about 30 years. Cagnoni is one of those guys who's going to be can either play in the WHL or can go to the AHL because of his age. He, I thought, had a really nice game on Friday. Again, with these smaller defensemen, it's always, can they play defense? You saw his ability. I thought he played really well defensively, and he's just such a wizard in the offensive zone. He's always calm. His ability to skate and, again, kind of create space for himself and for his teammates. He was running the power play for the Sharks, the first team power play. And I thought Cagnoni had himself a really nice game on Friday, and expect that to hopefully carry forward so he can play on the Barracuda and be an impact player on the Barracuda. Quentin Musty, who I mentioned a little bit earlier, I thought he played well. Philip Beested, the 2022, first round pick, Mike Greer's first round pick, kind of the forgotten man, but playing that third line center role. He played really well, and he had a really nice kind of end of the season in the AHL. Him and Ethan Cardwell already showed a bunch of chemistry last year. They put them together in this rookie tournament. They had combined for the game-winning goal on Friday, and I think B-Set is going to be that really overqualified third line center, because, again, when you have Celebrini and Smith down the middle, having that overqualified third line center, that's really where you can championship teams, I think, are kind of built, as having that guy who's probably a second line center on most other teams. But I think of B-Said, who his game translates much better to North American ice than his home Sweden. I expect him to have a really big season with the Barracuda this year and probably make his NHL debut at some point.
What is your biggest concern right now heading into training camp?
I think for the defense still, right? The Sharks have done a lot on the offense and getting guys, and you kind of see where that's going. Defensively, this team, they went out this offseason and they traded for Cody Ceci, as the Oilers were kind of trying to cap dump him, and that's fine. And they went out and they got Jake Wallman, who I think is a really solid player, and another kind of cap dump from the Detroit Red Wings. But this blue line is made up of a lot of older guys. You have Mark-Edward Vlasic, who's 37, so has 2 years left on his deal. Cody Ceci, who's 30. Jan Ruda, who's 34. Matt Benning, who's 30, coming off a season of injury. There's a lot of older guys in the lineup, and hopefully some improvement this year, because his defense was just not good last year, as they were the league's worst team in goal differential at minus 150. I would like to see a way for some of their younger defensemen to try to kind of get some playing time here soon. Guys like Shakira Mukhamadullin, who spent the entire season in the AHL last year. But the defense are just so many question marks from a unit that was just so bad last year. I don't know if there's a lot of avenue for improvement there. I feel solid about the forwards. I think Mackenzie Blackwood had a really good season with the Sharks in net. You have Vitek Vanacek, who's coming off an injury. Then you have Askarov, who's going to be playing NHL games this year as well. So at least you see like a path forward there for Askarov to kind of be the guy. But I still have questions about this defense and if they can show maybe just a new system with Ryan Warsofsky or whatever it is. Like I still feel like this team's probably going to be in a lot of kind of 5-4 type of games, which would be an improvement from 7-1 games that they played last year. So,
all right, JD, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
Of course, you can find Locked On Sharks wherever you listen to podcasts, and you can watch on YouTube as well. You can also check out tomorrow, where Seth and I cover Western Conference Tuesdays. We're doing burning questions for all the Western Conference teams. I think we're kind of in the middle of the alphabet right now, so check back for that. And you can follow the show on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Locked On Sharks. Follow me on Twitter at MyFryHole.
JD, thanks a lot. Always a pleasure, my friend.
Thank you, Gil.
Today's episode is brought to you by your friends at FanDuel. You've heard us talk about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then, with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. In the meantime, you can check out all the great odds at FanDuel, whether it's college football, professional football. Hey, hockey fans, take a look at hockey futures. The season is just around the corner. Just visit FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook. That's FanDuel.com. Check it out today. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show the host of Locked On Blackhawks, Jack Bushman. And Jack, rookie tournaments underway this weekend. Lots of news for the Blackhawks. How did they fare in this tournament this weekend?
Yeah, it was just fun to see hockey back in action this week, Gil. Even if it is an exhibition between, prospects of the Chicago Blackhawks and the other teams, the Minnesota Wild and the St. Louis Blues, involved in the Tom Curvers Prospect Showcase down in St. Louis. But yeah, just really fun to see game-like situation happening after, the long off season. We were just talking before air about a little how dreadful August can be sometimes. We finally have gotten past that point and getting some game-like situations. But yeah, it was a fun showing for the Blackhawks. My first and biggest takeaway I would have to say is what a strong showing from Frank Nazar up front. He was one of the two probably most notable players on the Blackhawks rookie camp roster, especially the one up front. He was kind of the name in the forward group that most Blackhawks fans had circled. Artem Levshinov was the one on the back end. I know we'll get to him in just a moment, but what we really wanted to see out of Frank Nazar this weekend in the Prospect Showcase was him taking over games, was him being the best player out there for the Blackhawks. And that's exactly what we got. He got off to a phenomenal start on Friday in the opening game. Gil actually drew a penalty and picked up an assist on the Blackhawks opening goal within the first 60 seconds of the game and kept the momentum going from there, had a lot of good puck control. And then actually in their game here on Saturday night, they just wrapped up their second game of the weekend. He had a dominant 3-point performance and really carried them to the victory. So a huge box checked off there with Frank Nazar really needing to have not only a good rookie camp, but a good training camp to get himself on this Blackhawks opening night roster. It's still an outside chance, but he's put that good first effort and crossed off that box here for this weekend. And outside of that, just getting to see a couple other of the prospects that the Blackhawks have accumulated that we really haven't got to see much looks at these last couple of years. Nick Lardis, someone who was a third-round pick a couple of years ago, had a really strong showing in the opening game. All in all, though, Gil, the thing that stood out to me the most about the Blackhawks this weekend in their 2 games in St. Louis was the pace that they play with, and that's really been a talking point for GM Kyle Davidson since he's taken over in this rebuild. And that's kind of how he's gone about retooling this Blackhawks roster. Is he wants to add speed all up and down the ice, and the Blackhawks have a boatload of prospects that play with great pace, and then also size on the back end. The Blackhawks didn't have a lot of their other defenseman prospects because some of them are playing in college hockey or some of them are a little bit older and have surpassed the prospect showcase stage. But even still, the shortest defenseman the Blackhawks had on their roster in this tournament this weekend, Gil, was 6'2". So it's really notable the size that they've tried to add on the back end. And I mean, you look at teams that have won the Stanley Cups in the past 10 years, half decade, most of them, if not all of them, have a lot of size on the back end. So you don't really care too much about the wins and the losses that come from a prospect showcase like this. It's all about kind of what you're seeing in terms of what the Blackhawks have created in their prospect pool. And what was noticeable to me was the size that they have on the back end and then the speed that they play with. That's a good combo. And I know that's really going to be a focal point of this team whenever, hopefully sooner rather than later, they get back to playing competitive hockey once again.
You mentioned Artem Levshinov. What is the update? I know he's been injured.
Yeah, not an ideal start to his first pro season, of course, after making the leap out of Michigan State, foregoing his sophomore year. He is in a walking boot for the next 2 weeks, according to Elliot Friedman in his 32 Thoughts column that he dropped on Friday morning for Sportsnet. And there could be a maximum of 6 weeks that Levshinov spends off of the ice, which unfortunately would mean he misses all of training camp and the preseason. It's not really going to impact where he's going to start the season, Gil. Odds were that he was going to open things up with the Rockford Ice Hogs in the American Hockey League. He would have had to have, such a standout camp to make the Blackhawks roster. But it just stinks to not get an opportunity to see what this year's second overall pick has in store, right? We obviously saw a lot of good things from him during his freshman season with Michigan State, but we wanted to see what he had for us during the Tom Curvers Prospect Showcase this weekend and kind of getting a little bit of a feel of where he's at against professional competition. I'm sure he was going to get, a couple of games during the preseason. We're not going to get those looks for Artem Levshinov, which is a little bit unfortunate. So I guess he's probably going to be out for somewhere around 5 to 6 weeks, with him being such a pivotal part of this rebuild here in Chicago. Fixture of the blue line. The front office is hoping for years and years to come, right? There doesn't really need to be any rush to bring him back, but not only does it stink that we're not going to see Levshinov probably until the Rockford Ice Hogs open up their season in late October, but it's going to provide more minutes, more opportunities for several players on the back end who are trying to make the opening night roster as well. And with the Blackhawks not really being the deepest on the right side of their blue line, that was a main point in why they drafted Levshinov with the second overall pick. Some of the guys who can play their offside, like Nolan Allen, who we saw this weekend in the Prospect Showcase, Wyatt Kaiser, who's kind of a fringe NHL to AHL player at this point of his career. He's played the offside on the right defenseman slot in the past. So just going to be more opportunities and more minutes in training camp in the preseason for other guys who are really trying to take a job in training camp.
This team has been stockpiling draft picks over the last 3 years at least, trying to rebuild, retool. Who are some players out of this young prospect pool that may be breaking out this year, making the jump to the NHL?
Yeah, there are probably only a couple of guys who could actually, I think, creep their way onto the Blackhawks roster just because of all the moves that they made this offseason, Gil. They brought in a lot of veterans, and quite honestly, you could make an argument that the Blackhawks, with such a deep prospect pool, have a little bit too much of a logjam going on right now. There might not be an opportunity for several guys to kind of creep their way into the NHL spot, but that was kind of done on purpose. I think this front office really wants to make sure guys from the top to the bottom of this roster have to earn their jobs. And I think that in theory is what they're hoping is going to help this team take the next step. But as far as some guys I would potentially look at, first and foremost, I talked about him earlier, but I think Frank Nazar is probably the one who I think has the best shot of the youngsters to make this team. And it was so great to see him have the type of performance we wanted to see this weekend at the Tom Curvers Prospect Showcase. Had a phenomenal sophomore campaign with Michigan this past year after missing the most of his freshman year due to a lower body injury, and actually got an opportunity to make his NHL debut, signing his entry-level contract after Michigan was knocked out of the Frozen Four. He scored his first NHL goal. I thought the pace in which he played at was really notable, and just the way that he can play with that high octane speed. He's a really good playmaker, sneaky shot, and very competitive. I really have kind of pinned him in as one of the pivotal pieces of the Blackhawks rebuild. So he's certainly the one that I'm going to be keeping an eye on during training camp, and I know a lot of other people are as well. Another name to throw out there is Colton Dach, Kirby Dach's little brother, former third overall pick, of course, for the Blackhawks in 2019. Colton was a second round pick the year after, and quite honestly, he probably would have made the NHL one of these last 2 years, Gil, for at least his debut or a short stint had he not been berated by injuries, unfortunately. But he's 6'4", 210 pounds, kind of has the same mold as Kirby, but plays more of a true power forward style game. And going into this year, he talked with the media recently and told them that the Blackhawks organization really wanted to see added physicality and kind of almost added emotion out of him out there on the ice. And he really brought that in the Tom Curvers Prospect Showcase this weekend. And he's even been vocal with the media saying he's like a man on a mission trying to take a job here in training camp. So I love that demeanor. I love that aggressiveness. I think Frank Nazar and Colton Dach are probably two guys to keep an eye out for in terms of prospects that have a likely chance of creeping their way onto the opening night lineup.
All right, Jack, I know you'll have training camp, preseason, the regular season covered every step of the way. Why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
Yeah, absolutely. You can check out Locked On Blackhawks for free wherever you may be listening to your podcast. We're back 5 episodes a week coming next week. Training camps opening up. We got the preseason coming after. So definitely be sure to follow the podcast for daily episodes on the Chicago Blackhawks. You can also check out the show's page on X at @L_O_Blackhawks. And for my personal, right down below at Jack Bushman 2.
All right, Jack, thanks so much.
Thank you, Gail. Always fun.
It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show the co-host of Locked On Leafs, David Morassutti. And David, never a dull moment for the Leafs, even in the offseason, even in rookie camp. Let's start off with Nick Robertson. He signs finally on the dotted line, but still a lot of rumors that he may not be on the roster when the season starts. What are you seeing right now?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's a tough situation for Nick Robertson because, during his, I guess, last few years here, his development has kind of taken a bit of a wrong turn for him, right? Once viewed as like one of the top prospects in this team system, he's, struggled to stay healthy, struggled to produce, also in a way struggled to really grasp a full-time role of what he's supposed to do to stay in the NHL, right? Last year plays very well, gets demoted, not because of play, but because of salary cap reasons. Very demoralizing in a lot of ways for a player who, felt he was really establishing himself, then having to take a bit of a step backwards for reasons that are beyond his control. So he signs the deal. We all know that there's the request for him to be traded. And I think that had more to do with he just wanted find a place where he can get a fresh start, right? And get maybe a renewed opportunity. But the problem is, there wasn't really a deal out there, right? Like, if there was a deal that made sense for the Leafs to do for Nick Robertson wouldn't be on the Leafs right now. And I think eventually someone got to tell him, like, take the 1-year deal, bet on yourself, whether that's go through camp, show you can do something, and maybe a team then takes a chance and wants to trade for you, or the Leafs have abundance of opportunity right now to play and to be a regular contributor in this lineup. But at the same time, it's up to the player to make the decision hard on the coach. And it also helps that there's a new coach in town who will have his own opinion on Nick Robertson when he goes into training camp. So, when the new coach's approval, that's, I think, the best case scenario for him right now.
And, the Leafs also adding Max Pacioretty on a PTO. What do you think the odds are that he sticks with the team? And if he does, what role would he play?
I think the big part here, obviously, everyone says, is his health. If Pacioretty gets through camp healthy, I think, it's almost like said that he is going to be on the team, right? The agent pretty much, as soon as the PTO is signed, there's a deal on the table as long as he gets through camp. And like the Leafs went through a lot to ensure that he was ready for this opportunity, right? They made him do some testing on the ice, show that what his skating is like. He went above and beyond. And I listened to an interview that he did actually on the show his agent hosts, and basically talking about how he's really taken his fitness very seriously the last few years. Like, this is a player who's rehabbed a lot through injuries and hasn't really been able to train. So I think, and a lot of people may not understand the difference, really, like not being able to get on the ice and doing the work that you want to do in your offseason program. I think that's really hurt Max Pacioretty. I think that's only going to help him, go into this season. And look, the Leafs do not have a lot of options on left wing. And I know that people are like, well, you're not going to get the Max Pacioretty that scored 30 goals years ago. I said, the Leafs don't need a Max Pacioretty that scores 30 goals. They need a Max Pacioretty that could come in and produce lower in the lineup. The fourth line has been so brutal at providing offense for this team. Having a Max Pacioretty there, I think, is going to just help spread things out when it comes to the scoring. Now, there is some competition. I don't think there's ever really a guarantee. No GM's going to give a guarantee on a PTO, but Pacioretty, given his years of experience, I think it's almost safe to say that as long as he gets through camp healthy, he'll be on the Leafs start the season.
Now, this past weekend, rookie tournaments all over the league, the Leafs participating, and yet some injury scares going on over the course of the weekend. Why don't you fill us in on who got injured and what the prognosis is as far as you know?
Yeah, even before the tournament started, Van Danford, their top pick from this year's draft, a lot of people were excited to see what he can do. He was hurt in a scrimmage. That was a tough one. He got hit along the boards, and then calling it a upper body, I think, head injury. And again, that's tough. Not being able to see one of your top prospects on the ice there. So that was a kind of the first blow. And then Fraser Minton, who I think was having a standout performance, in this tournament. He suffers an injury. They took him out for precautionary reasons. Obviously, that's never good to see a player leave a game. But I think, in a tournament like this where it's just a showcase for these players, don't put your players in a position to hurt or get hurt more than maybe they need to be. So the Minton one, I think, will hurt a little bit more because that's a player right there that the Leafs want to have take a spot when the season opens, right? There's a gaping hole at third line center. He actually won the job out of camp last year, but I think that felt more like Sheldon Keefe didn't like the options and went with the Fraser Minton, and maybe he wasn't ready for it. This year, another year of juniors, another year where he really showed maturity in his game. And look, in that prospect tournament, what I was seeing, I saw a lot of similar things, but I just saw a more confident approach from Fraser Minton. I said, this is a guy I could see playing third line center. Again, prospect tournament, you have to take all those with a bit of a grain of salt because of the competition. But he excelled, right? When a player like that excels, you get a little excited about that.
No doubt. Anyone else stand out in the tournament or any potential young breakout players for the Leafs in camp this year? I know it's a veteran team.
It is a veteran team, and especially that's been like the big thing that's been talked about lately are the Leafs now having too many veterans? They look at the guys they added this summer, right? Chris Tanev, Oliver Ekman-Larsson. Then you can add Max Pacioretty to that list. That's three guys over the age of 30, right? No, that's the Leafs. I feel like they do need to rely on some of their younger talent. So two guys, And I've been waiting for these guys to really see if they can maybe be an option during camp. Now, they had really good tournaments here. That's Topi Niemela and Roni Hirvonen, two of like their big Finnish draft picks from years ago under Kyle Dubas. That first he was waiting for them to come from Finland to North America. Then they come here, and you haven't heard, but we haven't heard much about them. You know, they've done really good things overseas, World Juniors and things like that. But with the Marlies, they were it was a bit quiet on their front. Those two are players I think I'm looking at to see if they can have a bit of a breakout in camp, because whether it's injury or just even competition, I want to see one of those two guys push for a spot in camp, because the Leafs do need to get younger. And there's going to be a bit of a salary cap crunch with this team. I know they're not too bad like as in years past, but there might be a trade or two that'll have to happen to make this team salary cap compliant. And one of these guys, if they make the team out of camp, that makes that salary cap crunch just a bit easier.
No doubt about that. David, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
Yeah, you can find the podcast where you get your podcast from. Also, make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube, Locked On Leafs. Follow us on X at Locked On Leafs. And you can follow myself, _Morassutti, 2 S's, 2 T's on X.
All right. David, thank you so much.
Thank you, Gil.
Thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen of the day. For your second listen, enjoy Locked On NHL Prospects, so you can keep tabs on all the greatest prospects outside the NHL all year long. It's available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank my guest, J.D. Young of Locked On San Jose Sharks. I want to thank Jack Bushman of Locked On Blackhawks and David Morassutti of Locked On Leafs for joining us today. I'm Gil Martin. I host the Monday edition of Locked On NHL, and I co-host the Friday edition along with Rachel Donner. Don't forget, we are here every day, Monday through Friday, bringing you the biggest stories from around the National Hockey League right here on the Locked On NHL podcast. Have a great day, everybody. Stay safe, and thank you for listening to and watching the Locked On NHL podcast.